I said that I was going to give some input for someone who said that they were having a great deal of trouble sensing energy, basically, that they don't. They don't feel it, they don't see it. There's no, like, yes, there's energy here. I am familiar with this problem. I
Ian is
personally
aphantasic.
am very familiar with this problem. Couple of things. One, I have this problem less than I used to. That is because I have used specific techniques to start building up my tactile senses and my visual senses for magic, and even then, I doubt I'll ever see like clear color spell shapes, if that makes sense. Like, she has full visual, see everything. I doubt I'll ever get to that. I'm mostly okay with that because I've seen what it does to her, including the need for regular sanity checks. Um, my primary, okay, what I have observed is that the majority of people detect energy in the primary way that their brain processes information. Um, because essentially, you have this ability to detect stuff that isn't going through a standard sensory cortex, and so your brain lumps it in with your primary sensory cortex and processes the information that way. For the majority of people, that turns out to be visual because guess what? Our visual cortex is enormous. We process tons of visual data all the time, and a lot of people are primarily visual. That's not the case for everybody. You will also find people who interpret, um, who interpret it as like music. Um, Actually, a really good fictional example of this is in the Dark is Rising sequence. The main character has bits of music that will play in his head anytime particular magic is at play. Um, or will sort of hear a voice telling you what's going on. I've encountered that one as well. Um, some people will get olfactory information, they'll smell stuff. A curse will smell rotten, a demon will smell like brains. Um, maybe maybe protective magic will smell like roses. I've encountered people who have different sort of smell codes for themselves as well. And then there's me. Tactile also. People saying that they feel energy, like it's heat, like it's cold, like it's static, like it's whatever. That's also a fairly common one. My primary way of processing data actually is not sensory at all. It's possible that it's proprioceptive, if you consider proprioception to be a sense. We haven't quite worked that out yet. But I primarily interpret things just by knowing them. I get raw info dumps into my brain. It's a little bit frustrating. Partially, it's a little bit frustrating because it is not a way in which I am used to interacting with information that I gather from the physical world, which means that especially when I was getting started, I did a lot of sanity checks. There wasn't sort of the, I'm seeing something extra, so this is an extra dimension to my life. It was a, suddenly I know this thing. There is no obvious reason for me to know this thing, and that is not a way in which I am used to interacting with reality, although it kind of is. That's a different conversation. We can get into that later if anyone's curious. Um, so, hey, I suddenly know this thing. Does that line up? Is that a thing? And it turned out that more often the answer was, yeah, you're not just making that up. That's not just your imagination feeding you. Congratulations, you get raw info dumps. Um, it has been work to get from raw info dumps to sensory perception. Um, and essentially, I had to take okay, I know there's something here. I'm going to literally stick my hand in it and focus really hard on the tactile sensations coming from that hand, to the point of asking everyone to be quiet and shutting my eyes to block out additional sensory input. I now have sort of a prickling tactile sensation around energy, and it's typically not differentiated past that. I actually used a completely different technique to get the ability to see energetic forms. This was the opening the second set of eyes one. It only works when I actively turn it on and have some focus dedicated to it. And it relied on a fairly thorough knowledge of my energetic body, astral body, psychic body, whatever term you want, auric body, whatever term you want to use. Which in my case was relatively straightforward because I've been dreamwalking literally as long as I can remember. Actually, longer than I can remember. That's a different. That's also a different but semi-related thing. And in that case, I essentially focused on the body that I would be in if I was projecting, and on being aware of it simultaneous with being aware of my physical body, and then opened the eyes on both at the same time, while they were lined up in the same space. Because a purely energetic body uses its purely energetic eyes to see energetic forms and constructs, and I am able, by essentially lining them up with my physical eyes and opening them both, to get that translated into visual data in my physical brain.
Sky Tower says, I'm at the point that I've not experienced energy enough to notice anything other than my own. If I meditate long enough, I will feel an electricity I can move around with my focus, but that could just be hyper-awareness of my neurons where I'm focusing. That doesn't mean that that's not effective.
Right. You're right. It could be. But that doesn't mean that the hyper-awareness of the neurons is not also linked to your personal energetic field being mobile. In fact, in some ways, having a hyper-awareness of a specific set of neurons could in fact activate a particular portion of your energetic field if you start getting into the where does this energetic field actually come from in the skeptic's corner. You start looking into things like the research coming out of the Princeton Pears Laboratory. Turns out that neural activity is a relevant factor. Also, so the exercise that I generally start people with who can feel their own energy but not necessarily other energies in the room involves having two people at about that stage. One of who stand at opposite sides of a room. One of them shuts their eyes and holds out one hand. The other one slowly and quietly walks toward them. There will come a point where the person with their eyes shut will detect something. You then tell the person to stop. They stop in place. What you have detected is the intersection of your energetic field and their energetic field. And if you repeat this experiment with the same two people a number of times walking at different rates, the vast majority of the time, it turns out the person walking gets stopped at almost exactly the same place every time. So that is an exercise that I have.
You could try buying one of the mind lamps.
Those are cool if you can find one.
It's basically, it was created from the Princeton Pear Laboratories research into the effect of the brainwaves on random number generation.
Essentially, and so it's got a random number generator in it. And it also has and the random number generator controls the colors that the lamp is turning. And it turns out that if you think a color at the lamp, it will skew towards that color. I don't know for sure if we can try and find a product link. I know that they exist. I've toyed with one a little bit in the past. I don't know if they're commercially available right now, but we can look into that a little bit. The main point for detecting energy is noticing when something is different. And it doesn't have to be something that you see. It doesn't have to be something that you hear. It doesn't have to be something that you smell. It can be something that you just notice. A sixth sense, if you will, that just taps you on the shoulder and goes, hey, something's different about this. And I find that a lot of people get stuck on how they should feel energy, see energy, perceive energy, experience energy, and ignore the whatever it is for them that lets them know that something is different. And I think that that can be somewhat harmful, and I think that it definitely causes problems.
Yeah.
I think I beat that into the ground. Did I cover
I think
that
you did
thoroughly?
great.